Jason Voorhees stands as one of horror cinema's most enduring and physically imposing figures. Emerging from the Friday the 13th franchise beginning in 1980, this hockey-masked killer has become synonymous with slasher horror, summer camp dread, and the archetype of the unstoppable monster. Unlike villains who rely on psychological manipulation or supernatural powers, Jason represents pure physical menace, a silent, relentless force of nature that embodies revenge, tragedy, and the consequences of negligence and cruelty. The Friday the 13th franchise introduced audiences to Camp Crystal Lake, a fictional location in New Jersey that becomes the stage for decades of bloodshed. The original film's twist revealed that Jason's mother, Pamela Voorhees, committed the murders, driven mad by grief over her son's drowning years earlier. Jason himself didn't become the primary antagonist until the sequel, establishing a pattern where maternal love twisted into murderous obsession births an even more dangerous legacy. This familial trauma foundation distinguishes Jason from randomly malevolent supernatural entities. Jason's backstory centers on childhood tragedy and societal failure. According to franchise mythology, young Jason drowned in 1957 at Camp Crystal Lake due to counselor negligence. The staff, distracted by romantic pursuits, failed to supervise the deformed, mentally challenged child who couldn't swim. This moment of fatal carelessness creates the franchise's moral core. Jason's subsequent killing spree targets primarily teenagers engaging in the same irresponsible behaviors that led to his death. The punishment becomes grotesquely disproportionate, but thematically consistent. The character's visual evolution tracks horror cinema's changing aesthetics. Early appearances showed Jason with a burlap sack covering his deformed face, creating an unsettling, crude menace. The iconic hockey mask didn't appear until the third film, but once introduced, it became instantly definitive. The mask's blank, expressionless surface creates a void where viewers project their fears, while the single red chevron marking adds just enough asymmetry to prevent complete anonymity. This simple design achieved iconic status rivaling any horror character's appearance. What makes Jason particularly terrifying is his apparent indestructibility. Across multiple films, he survives drowning, hanging, axe wounds, electrocution, and even apparent death multiple times. This supernatural resilience transforms him from human killer into something resembling a force of nature or vengeful spirit. The franchise never fully explains whether Jason is undead, supernaturally empowered, or simply extraordinarily resilient, maintaining ambiguity that enhances rather than diminishes his threat. He simply cannot be stopped permanently. Jason's silence distinguishes him from more theatrical horror villains. Unlike Freddy Krueger's constant taunting or Pinhead's philosophical speeches, Jason never speaks. This muteness makes him less human, more mechanical in his violence. The absence of dialogue removes any possibility of reasoning, pleading, or understanding. Victims face a purely physical threat impervious to emotional appeals. The silence also creates space for more visceral sound design, heavy breathing, footsteps, the swish of weapons cutting through air. The franchise's appeal lies partly in its formula's predictability and variation. Each film follows similar patterns. Young people arrive at or near Camp Crystal Lake, engage in behavior Jason punishes: drinking, drugs, sex, and face systematic elimination until a final survivor emerges. Within this structure, the films provide creative variation in kill methods, settings, and character types. This formula became both strength and limitation, providing comfort food for horror fans while constraining narrative ambition. Director and effects artist Tom Savini contributed significantly to the franchise's impact through groundbreaking practical effects. The original film's kills set new standards for graphic violence in mainstream cinema, pushing boundaries for what audiences would accept and censors would allow. Subsequent films competed to deliver increasingly elaborate and creative deaths, making special effects showcases as important as storytelling. Jason's kills became the primary attraction, with audiences anticipating how the next victim would die. The character embodies primal fears about nature's dangers and civilization's fragility. Camp Crystal Lake exists at the boundary between urban safety and wilderness threat. The camp represents attempts to control and commercialize nature, creating artificial recreation spaces. Jason emerges from the lake itself, nature's revenge against those who treat it carelessly. His attacks often occur when victims wander away from group safety into isolated forest or lake areas, punishing those who underestimate natural dangers. Friday the 13th's relationship with morality remains complex and controversial. The films appear to punish teenage sexuality and hedonism, with virgins and good kids typically surviving while sexually active characters die first. This pattern led to extensive critical analysis about conservative moral messaging in slasher films. However, the franchise's self-aware later entries sometimes subverted these patterns, acknowledging and playing with audience expectations about who survives and why. The mother-son relationship at the franchise's core adds psychological depth to straightforward slasher mechanics. Pamela Voorhees' vengeful love drives the original murders, while Jason's subsequent rampage stems from loyalty to his mother's memory and rage over his own suffering. This twisted family bond makes Jason more than a simple monster. He's a child who never grew beyond trauma, perpetually reenacting revenge for wrongs committed decades earlier. The damaged son continuing his mother's violent mission creates tragedy beneath the horror. Jason's cultural impact extended far beyond the films themselves. He became a Halloween costume staple, appeared in video games, inspired countless parodies, and entered common cultural vocabulary. The Friday the 13th date itself gained enhanced ominous connotations through association with the franchise. Jason's image became so ubiquitous that people unfamiliar with the film still recognize the hockey mask as a symbol of horror and danger. The franchise's longevity required creative reinvention across shifting horror trends. When slashers declined in popularity, Jason Goes to Hell introduced supernatural mythology about his spirit possessing other bodies. Jason X transported him to space for science fiction horror fusion. Freddy vs. Jason pitted him against Nightmare on Elm Street's antagonist in crossover spectacle. These variations demonstrated both the character's flexibility and the challenge of maintaining relevance across decades. The 2009 remake attempted to modernize Jason for new audiences while respecting franchise foundations. It combined elements from early films, presented a more physically agile Jason, and emphasized his intelligence and trap-setting abilities. While commercially successful, the remake struggled to recapture the original's cultural impact, demonstrating how certain horror franchises remain tied to specific eras and cannot be fully transplanted to contemporary contexts without losing essential qualities. Jason represents the revenge tragedy archetype filtered through horror cinema. His violence stems directly from wrongs committed against him, making his actions comprehensible if not justifiable. The teenagers he kills are typically guilty only of minor irresponsibility or normal adolescent behavior, creating profound moral disproportion. This imbalance between initial wrong and subsequent punishment creates the franchise's uncomfortable tension. We understand Jason's pain while being horrified by his response. The camp setting itself carries significant cultural weight. Summer camps represent American adolescent rites of passage, spaces of relative freedom from parental supervision where young people explore independence. By making this traditionally safe, wholesome environment deadly, the franchise corrupts childhood nostalgia and transforms recreational space into hunting ground. The contrast between camp's intended fun and the brutal violence occurring there creates disturbing cognitive dissonance. Friday the 13th's influence on horror cinema standards cannot be overstated. It established templates for slasher film structure, kill sequences, and character types that dozens of imitators followed. The franchise demonstrated horror's commercial viability, encouraging studios to invest in similar properties. It also pushed boundaries for graphic content in mainstream releases, forcing ongoing negotiations between filmmakers' creative vision, studio commercial interests, and censorship standards. Jason's apparent lack of motive beyond revenge and territorial protection makes him more force of nature than character. He doesn't hunt victims across distances or pursue elaborate schemes. Instead, he remains tied to Camp Crystal Lake, attacking those who intrude on his domain. This territorial behavior resembles animal predation more than human malice, adding to his inhuman quality. He's the lake's guardian, eternally protecting the site of his trauma from those who remind him of past tormentors. The franchise's treatment of Jason's humanity varies significantly across entries. Some films emphasize his childlike aspects, the damaged boy who never matured, responding to threats with violence because he knows no other response. Other entries present him as purely monstrous, an evil entity without redeeming qualities. This inconsistency reflects different directors' visions, but also mirrors audience ambivalence about whether Jason deserves sympathy or represents pure evil, deserving destruction. Modern horror analysis recognizes Friday the 13th's problematic elements, gender politics, violence glorification, and potentially conservative moral messaging, while acknowledging its cultural significance and influence. The franchise exists as both important horror milestone and product of its time, containing attitudes and approaches contemporary viewers might find troubling. This complexity makes it valuable for understanding horror cinema's evolution and broader cultural shifts in attitudes toward violence, sexuality, and entertainment. Jason Voorhees ultimately endures because he embodies horror's simplest, most primal appeal, the unstoppable threat. No reasoning stops him, no pleading moves him, no strategy defeats him permanently. He represents mortality itself, the inevitable end that cannot be negotiated or avoided. Wrapped in the specific trappings of summer camp slasher horror, Jason speaks to universal fears about death's inevitability and nature's indifference to human concerns. He remains silent and waiting, an icon of horror's enduring power to terrify through the simplest of premises. Something out there wants you dead, and it cannot be stopped.